What's up, everybody? What's up, YouTube? We're doing another design process video. Today, I've got a friggin' microphone. We're gonna try to get some higher definition audio in here. Today, I'm gonna be going over how I created this spaceship graphic. So, I found this picture of this nice little welder man in an old newspaper. Took a photo, popped it in, and what do you know? The first thing I start doing is hitting it with the stamp filter. It's just been my go-to lately. It's a lot of people's go-tos lately to try to get that sort of Xerox, old school, vintage effect. So here I am messing with the light and dark balance. It's a very key feature of the stamp filter, which is in the filter gallery, by the way. So once I got that locked in, I just cleaned up the sides a little bit. Sometimes there's little artifacts from scanning stuff in or bringing in photos from old archival sources. And you just got to tidy it up. Now, when I first started building this image, I really didn't have a clue where I was going with it. Sometimes I just make pieces for Instagram, for the feed, just to try to keep my skills up. And this is one of those. Didn't really know where I was going. I thought he looked very intent on building something crafty. I don't know what he's doing in this photo. So here I'm adding some text. That is not the font I wanted. I tried it in this Bangiat Pro. I don't know how you're supposed to say that, but it's like the Stranger Things font. I recently downloaded it. I'm not sure how to use it without just seeming like I'm biting Stranger Things all the time. It's just like becomes so kind of associated with the show. For better or for worse. I mean, I've heard it's a good show. I haven't seen it. Great font, super kind of. To me, it speaks kind of like sci-fi aesthetic. It just looks like something you'd find on like an old paperback sci-fi novel. But right here, I'm kind of like trying to mix it up a little bit, put a secondary font in there, and just trying it out. One thing that every graphic designer should be doing is exploring font options or typeface. I'm not professionally trained. I've heard that a lot of people prefer to call them typefaces, but I'm going to call them fonts because I don't care. So here I was trying to get like a little bit more futuristic with the spaceship font. I like that one. What's that one called? Condor. I forget where I got that one. Is that a Adobe font? Not sure. Anyways, I'm going to scroll ahead. Sometimes it takes me forever to pick a font. Okay. Yeah, then I hit it with this P22 Franklin Caslon, which I did like for the bottom text. I thought it had kind of a... It's nice because it's kind of already got like a built-in distressed feel. Also forget where I got that one. But I didn't think it looked so hot up top, so I eventually changed it to Microgramma, coming up in a little bit. Right now, I'm going to find myself a spaceship. So I found this off a stock image website. Funny thing about stock image websites is that sometimes people will upload their own Photoshop creations. This was obviously one of those. Just an absolutely bizarre composition of a spaceship in space, of course. Just kind of an outline of a planet in the distance. All this strange, like, fantasy architecture, as well as this prehistoric little mollusk being. But all I wanted was that nice spaceship, which, to my eyes, was new. It looks pretty Star Wars-esque, but for someone named Luke, I guess I'm not as familiar with the Star Wars architecture and spacecraft options as I could be. But, so right there, let me rewind real quick. This is one of my favorite new tools, new to me because I was rocking a pirated copy of Adobe CS3 for like 10 years. Finally got on the subscription plan. Love you, Adobe. But with the subscription comes all the updates to Adobe, and one of the ones that's new to me is the object selection tool. Basically, you can kind of just click in the center of an object, and it's smart enough to know most of the time what you're going for. And in this case, it did a great job of just automatically selecting the outline of the spaceship. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. This time I got pretty lucky. I only had to do a little bit of fine-tuning, touch-up work with it, which I was happy to do. For some reason, it's one of the more therapeutic parts of photoshopping to me. Sometimes I work pretty fast, but doing this sort of stuff really slows me down. So here I am using the polygonal lasso tool. I forget what that one's called. So you can basically select straight lines and make your little selection. Looks like I'm going real slow there, so I'm going to speed it up. So what I did there, so I had a selection of all the stuff outside it. This is probably pretty basic for a lot of you, but this is something that I didn't learn until I was several years deep into Photoshop, was how to use masks properly. So I already created a mask on the layer, on the spaceship layer, and then what I'm doing here is selecting parts of the image that I want to mask further. So I made the first mask with the object selection tool, and now I'm using the lasso tool to fine-tune and add to the mask, which if you add more mask, you subtract more visible image. So once I have this selected, I then take the paint bucket tool and I fill this in with black on the mask, which masks it. And then I keep going. And then I have a pretty much cut out spacecraft. Pew! So once I got my spacecraft cut out, big surprise. I'm going to hit it with the stamp filter. Smart filter, then stamp filter. And wow, what do you know? It looks pretty cool. Wanted to get the right amount of texture, and that's what you play with that light-dark balance slider for. I wanted a little bit on the lighter side. Sometimes when I make a lot of metal graphics or flyers, punk flyers, whatever, they tend to be really dark. So sometimes when I'm doing personal fun work, I try to have more white, more lightness. Just playing around. Different styles. Try to keep it fresh. Try to keep myself on my toes. So here I am starting to build the layout. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I had this welder guy, had the spaceship. Obviously they're different scales, but I kind of was able to make him line up with the spaceship, so it kind of looks like he's working on it. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I finally found my font for spaceship, which is the good old microgramma. It's a very popular font. You see it in a lot of places. I'm kind of spacing on some really famous ones. It's used everywhere. So right here, I put a stroke on it because it seemed like it was a little too dark for what I was trying to do with the composition. So I put the stroke on it. I also dropped it from bold to normal. I think I like the look of that better. Microgramma is a great font if you're doing anything kind of technological, anything space related. It's just kind of a futuristic font, but also looks good like with kind of 80s throwback vibes as well. Very versatile font. It's also a fun wide font. The more you play around with design, you kind of develop a stash of different shaped fonts. I would call this one a wide one. It's a long boy. Something like, I don't know, let's say Impact. That's more of a tall font. It's skinny or condensed. It's good to have a set of fonts for any application. So here I am, still figuring out my layout. Wasn't really sure. So much of a part of design is just trial and error. Just keep messing with stuff until something starts to click. I've been hunting for a secondary image, which is right here. Pulling that in right now. I wanted some sort of like vintage feel, but still space related, and managed to find this. I don't even know what this is from. Some weird almanac or something, but it's got this cool sun in it. It's got these weird little pilgrim looking dudes. They're kind of bugging out on the spaceship now. So I put that in the background, and that being a big old rectangle kind of tied the other pieces together. So there I have the text more centered. Drop the little guy off to the side, super small like. Sometimes just like little tags like that, to me at least, make it seem more official. It's like, oh, I've seen that on an old vintage t-shirt. They'll put the little like date or like a copyright symbol next to whoever made the graphic, owns the graphic. It's fun to just add little things like that. So here I was kind of like starting to fine tune stuff. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but it looks like I'm adding a stroke on the outside of the spaceship just to make it pop a little bit more. Oh no, I'm doing a white stroke to differentiate it from the background. Okay, smart. Give it a little space. So this is getting pretty darn close to my final composition. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in this screen recording. Just tweaking little things. So right here I'm going to do a classic to me text tweak to try to give it more dirtiness. So I converted the spaceship to a smart filter. And then what I'm going to do is add the displacement, distort, displace, and then I add Gaussian blur. Went over this in my last video. Blur it a little bit, and then you sharpen it after that. And you just get a nice, grungy, dirty texture to those lines that wasn't there before. I'm a big fan. Okay, so what I did here, which I think I got a little ahead of myself, was I grouped all the pieces of the image together and made that whole group a smart object. And then once I had that whole thing smart objected, smartly objectified, I added displace to that. I hit it with the displace filter, which made all the lines have that nice, rough texture to them. And it kind of just ties it all together. So now I'm going to start adding some textures. Another thing that you can see here is my texture folder. It's not that big, but highly recommend any graphic designer, avid Photoshop user just starts building kind of their own stash of assets. And the texture folder is probably the one that I use the most often by far. Once you kind of have the composition down, design down, I then drop some textures over it, some overlays to give it a little bit more flavor. This is one of my favorites. Forget where I found it, but it's a good folded piece of paper, black paper. And you can see on the right there the blending modes above you in your layers panel, above the layers, where it says linear dodge there. It's a great thing to get to know really well. And it's super easy to get to know it. Just play around. You can kind of live preview them. So it wasn't quite as light as I was hoping for. I really wanted a pretty faded sort of old newspaper look to this. So I put a smart filter on my overlay so that I can adjust it after the fact, and I up the brightness, made it a little bit lighter, and it's starting to get that nice texture that I'm a big fan of, that you'll see in all my recent work. And it looks like I'm just fine-tuning that overlay, centering the design. And I think it might have been right here that I started to realize that some of my lines were getting a little wacky. So I double-clicked. This is the beautiful thing about smart objects, is that you can just jump right in to something that you were previously editing as a whole. Double-click that layer that is a smart object, and then you can go back in and tweak what you had previously been working on. So looked like I had noticed an issue with this line from this background image going over the welder guy. So I'm going to fix that a little bit. I think also what I ended up doing was just dropping that in line with the background rectangle. Oh, not yet. So there I am, kind of investigating the small details, checking out whether I like the texture, whether I like the distortion that I added to it, the displacement. Once again, if you're not using smart objects, smart filters, you're dumb. You're creating a lot more work for yourself, and the ability to sort of like undo an effect you've been working with, or to go in and tweak an object that you have already placed somewhere, or a group of text. If you're having like heavily affected text, and then you realize, oh shoot, I messed up some of the text details, you can just go back in and tweak it, and you'll still have the same effects on top, even after you edit your text again. Smart objects are great. Smart filters, super helpful. Get to know them. Okay, see? I don't know if you're paying attention enough to notice the difference, but I forgot to screen record it. I was waiting for this to happen the whole time, and of course I didn't film it. But I lined up the welder. I just put him in line with that rectangle. It's a little more centered now. A little more lined up. And then I had to retweak the spaceship text a little bit to fit properly. I tried the bold again. Didn't like the bold, so went back to normal. This happens quite a lot, is me going back to a design after I already exported it, because sometimes I'll like pull it up on my phone and be like, that doesn't look quite right. Be like, what's wrong with that? And then gotta go back in and make version 2. But the beautiful thing about smart objects, about layers, about working in a digital environment, is that it's really easy to undo and to create different versions of whatever you're working on. Looks like I was also trying to add a little bit more Xerox flavor. Oh yeah, just filling in the spaceship. So right here, so I pulled up a different Xerox texture, and I made that a layer above the spaceship text. Right-click that, create clipping mask. And what that does is that it drops, if you're not familiar with clipping masks, is that it basically clips that image that's on top of the image below. It clips that into the shape of the layer below it. In this case, it put the texture in the shape of the text. It kind of puts it behind the text, really. So there I got this nice texture. It was a little too dark. So what did I do? I inverted it. So now I just get this sort of light, fainter texture on there that I feel is a little bit more balanced with the rest of the image. Just a little bit of dirt. And it's pretty much there. Export this sucker, and we're rocking. There's another semi-pointless poster to post on Instagram. I actually like this one. I feel like it came out clean. Dirty clean. Anyways, hope you learned something. If you like this sort of video, hit that subscribe button. Follow me on Instagram at Luke Aroney. I have a lot of different projects that link off of that page, most of them music related. And hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment what you want to see next. Peace.